So this show is in English. I've done it a couple of times. So an introduction, so you know what to expect. It's not exactly a stand-up comedy. I'm letting you know this so you're not expecting continuous jokes. And there's not much like a ha-ha, more like a hey-hey thing. And it's not exactly a play because I'm not acting. I'm actually sharing some of the stuff that we all struggle with. And it's not a lecture because I have an agenda, and I'll give you an idea of how this came about. Basically, during last summer, when things got really tough, I started noticing that we're internalizing the shame again, the shame of the situation, much like my generation during the Civil War. We started to say Arab Jarab, which means Arabs are lice, and when I left Lebanon in '85, I moved to Ireland. I started reading, and within a very short period of time, I realized we don't have a military industry. So what's sustaining this? And at the time, it was mainly America and Russia. So the show is kind of in two parts. The first part is just addressing how societies that are under pressure, whether it's colonized or when there's a very difficult situation, we end up internalizing the shame. So I'm putting it in a global context, and the context is that it's all fucked up. And I'm tracing the evolution of emotions since kind of, way before recorded history. So that's the first part. And the second part is not where are we going, because it doesn't look good, but where do we want to go? So the whole show is about an hour and a half, and the last 10 minutes, I'll summarize the whole show. And the title of the show is The Evolution of the Lebanese Brain, but I'm doing it in English, so I can put it up and share it with my friends in Ireland or whatever. But for tonight, I'm expanding the definition of Lebanese to include everybody here, irrespective of where you were born, and irrespective of what your nationality is or what passport you hold. The whole idea is actually to dissolve nationalism. And for just tonight, talk as one. So a couple of other things, in relation to dissolving nationalism, if you happen to come from, I'm going to be critical of a few things. One is religion. And the criticism is against, to be blunt, nutcases. I'm not against religion in general. If somebody has a religious belief, I'm not attacking that. It's usually the nutcases that shout strongest or have a venomous disposition, and it travels faster. And I'm gonna be, one of the things about Lebanese society is like, whoa, I know he's talking about, dissolving nationalism and he doesn't care about religion, but what is his religion? So I'll break it down for you. My mom is Christian, my dad is Muslim, and I'm married to a Druze, and I love music. That's my religion, So, that's the general idea, So, the development of the brain since dinosaur times. Now, why not start earlier? The reality is that I did try. When I was, about 7 or 8 years old, I went to my grandmother, and I was kind of fucking with her head a bit. I was like, grandmother, who created us? And she was like, God, of course, Allah. But who created God? Stop being blasphemous. So that didn't help. So later on, when I grew up, or pretended to be a grown-up, I started reading about quantum physics. And all the books on quantum physics is like, well, Earth is about 13.8 billion years. And before that, well, how did it happen? It was the Big Bang. And I'm start reading, what happened before the Big Bang? Nothing. What do you mean nothing? Well, nothing. And I'm reading, I'm trying to get different books and checking it out, and it's all nothing. So you're telling me that nothing exploded? So that didn't help either. So I'm beginning with the dinosaurs, and well, actually, slightly before dinosaurs. So before dinosaurs, how was life? A cell would die, it'd go to heaven. It's like, hello, how did you die? I got eaten. And about you, I got eaten too. And didn't mind. We didn't have an emotional attachment system. So nature was looking at this, and when I say nature, I'm talking about, evolution and how does life evolve? So nature was looking at this and was thinking, we need to put something to make living creatures fight for themselves. This shit about, dying and going to heaven and not minding, we need to change that. So with a bit of evolution, nature decided to put anger and fear in dinosaurs. And at the time, it was like just, with the reptilian brain is very primal, and it's mainly those two emotions, and something is smaller than you, you shout at it, or you eat it, you gulp it whole. Or if it's bigger than you, you get the fuck out of there, So with time, dinosaurs was like, fuck this shit, anger and fear all day, and that's all you got. Anger and fear, anger and fear. Now, originally, dinosaurs had much longer hands. What happened? Well, they shrunk so they could roll a joint and start smoking, And when they started smoking, it's like, oh, fuck this shit, we're not doing anything. Now, the theory of evolution says that the meteor is what made the dinosaurs extinct, but the reality is that the meteor only made half of the animals in this world extinct. And the dinosaurs knew a meteor was coming, but they don't give a shit. So that's how they got extinct. So back to the drawing board with nature trying to figure out what we're going to do here. So nature decided to create this really beautiful, fluffy creature, white like a big bear, and put only love in that creature. Well, within a couple of weeks, the lions started eating them, and there's only love, so they didn't mind. So the lion would be eating this beautiful creature's leg and looking up, and it's like, can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure. You don't mind me eating you? No, of course not. You need to, you need to eat, cold. You're gonna die tomorrow. Yes, of course I know, but you need to eat. You need to your family. So, again, within 2 weeks, they went extinct. So there's only like a couple of features I'm gonna put out in the screens behind me, and there's gonna be 2 videos in the beginning and a couple of pictures later on, just to give you an idea what to expect. So, with this video, I want you to just check it out because it explains why reptiles had to evolve into being mammals. So فينا نحط the iguana video, please.
A snake's eyes aren't very good, but they can detect movement. So if the hatchling keeps its nerve, it may just avoid detection. near miraculous escape.
Okay, so I think it's going to repeat. Okay, so 2 questions, and it explains why we need to belong to political parties. So the first question is, where's his mom and dad? Well, reptiles don't have an attachment system. So this guy born, and that's it. Victor, Sakura, please. So this is how the reptiles needed to evolve, because it was mainly fear and anger. So what do mammals look like? Because that's how reptiles basically. Now, with with the evolution of the brain, it's not like a completely new brain evolved. There's a reptilian brain, and then another brain grew on top of it. So I'm going to show you a very short, much shorter video, just to illustrate, and I don't have to explain it. You'll feel it in your gut. And now, but Baswatili's thought, can you turn down the music on that one, because it's fucked up music. So this is a small, I don't know, gazelle swimming. And there's a crocodile coming. Okay, so you get it? Philia, please. So basically what happened there is now there's an attachment system, meaning that the mother or father would sacrifice. And that extends beyond the family unit. It extends into tribes. And tribes is a political system. So now, this little gazelle, this little Bambi lost its mom, it will go to the political party and it's like, can I belong to you? Out of protection. So that's mammals. From there, we came into being, which is reptilian brain plus mammalian brain plus, for the purposes of today, is mainly a complex memory system and a complex system of analyzing. Now, I'm going to just highlight just 2 points to remember about this, which relates to politics. And I'm not going to ask you to remember much. I mean, I'm going to be taking you all over the place and just illustrating how complex human beings are and evolution, how complex evolution is. But it's only 2 points to remember about this. The first is that those 3 brains, the reptilian brain, plus the mammalian brains, and plus the human brain, the extra bits that are capable of analyzing, well, whenever there is fear or anger, it shuts the top faculties. What it means is that no matter how much you read and you study and how much yoga you do or meditation, all a politician has to do is convince you that your life is a threat for you to start acting from a primal place. The second point is that, again, for the purposes of today, I'm focusing on just 3 emotions. Now, we have far more complex emotions, but it's in terms of anger, fear, and love, the point is that they don't exist separately from each other. Meaning, your kid crosses the street, you shout at it, or him or she, that's anger. Because you love it, and you're scared for its life. Now, the kid is confused as fuck, but those 3 emotions are so intertwined that it's not possible to simplify. I think one of the biggest difficulties in seeing ourselves as civilized is that we would like to see ourselves as civilized, but the reality is that you have a nervous system, and it gets activated. It gets activated much faster than our intellect. I'm going to go back to that. But just to give you an idea of just how complex human relationships are, I'm going to give you a real-life example that happened with my wife and I, when I was writing this play. So I wake up, and it's like, hi, Habibti, good morning, my love. And she's like, good morning, we're still in bed. And spontaneously, I move over and I start choking her. And, she starts looking at me and says, why are you choking me? You're not going to get much out of the well. And I was like, I'm not choking you because I want your money. I'm choking you because I love you. Because the more I love you, the more I'm scared that I'm going to lose you. So I want to get rid of that feeling by killing you. Now, it's a joke that came out spontaneously, and it's a joke. But I just realized afterwards, fuck, man, that actually explains how complex human beings are. And that extends from the mammalian, from the gazelle you just saw being eaten. So, with a bit more evolution, we started asking the big questions, which is, what's the meaning of life? Life is really hard. Why are we here? So let's say 20,000 years ago. I'm going to just invite you to imagine a situation. So 20,000 years ago, we're asking the big questions, and let's say it's nighttime and it's dark and it's raining and it's scary and it's cold, and we don't know what's going on. We don't know what is lightning. We don't know what thunder is. So we started making stories, which is really mythology. And every culture has a mythology. Now, the purpose of a mythology is to create a story whereby we're engaging with the world. So it's an organic relationship, meaning, why is the thunder? I'll sacrifice a lamb for you. And next day, if it's still raining, what the fuck am I gonna do? So the story started to evolve and change organically within each culture. But the main point is that it's a direct relationship with nature, because we don't know what's going on, and we're making stories, and we're trying to negotiate. So that's 20,000 years ago, but today, what does it look like? Well, when the Abrahamic religions came, which is Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, what did they do? They got rid of all the mythologies. And now it's a guy with a beard, and he's an old guy, and they tell you, those three religions tell you that it's neither, it's genderless. God is genderless. But the religious men don't act that way. Now it's a fucking accountant. You do 99 things and one more thing than a negative thing, you're in heaven for the rest of eternity. And you do 2 things less, now your account is in the negative, now you're in hell for eternity. And with mythology, before that, one of the amazing things about mythology is that we human beings noticed that women would get pregnant, life comes from women. So women were sacred. But today, somehow they managed to take women out of everything. How the fuck did that happen? And it's a guy with a beard. They talk about love, but the acting, how, the day-to-day, and I'm not talking about every religious person, because I have met from every religion sensible, loving people who will sit down with you and try to connect from a heart level. But that's not how it happens when it gets too organized. We're back to anger and fear and controlling, and back to tribalism. So, as a teenager, I grew up in Tripoli, which is the north of Lebanon. If there are some non-Lebanese people here who not sure. So as a teenager, I was trying to figure this out, So I'm hearing this stuff about women being naqisat uqul, which is having a lesser brain than men. And I'm trying to figure this out. And I was like, how does that work out? So, and not all men were like that, but, in a macho society, yes, you get that attitude a lot, So I'm trying to figure it out. So this guy is so proud of himself because he's superior to his sister. She's dumber than him, so that he gets to feel good about himself. And what about his mom, who raised him? How does it work out that somebody is not as smart as he is, raised him? It didn't add up. And I'm trying to, I'm hitting sexuality, and I was like, I can't relate to this macho man, and I love women. With time I was like, okay, maybe I'm a lesbian then, So this male, and this is not just a feature, this macho thinking is not just a feature of, Islamic society or Arabic society. It exists everywhere, still today. I mean, by the way, I'm not saying women can't be dumb, because the mom of this guy who's raising him to feel he's smarter than his sisters, well, that's dumb as fuck. But I'm just trying to, and like you will have Republican, within the American Party, you'll have a woman voting against women's rights. So why am I talking about this? Because it's half of humanity. As a boy, I was trying to figure out, it wasn't fun for me to associate with with this kind of macho figure, because I can't imagine my life today or even back then. If I have a problem, I want to talk to my wife. I want to talk to my partner. But if I'm seeing her as dumb or less smart than me, I'm not going to be talking to her. So, and the reality is that somehow today, we've managed, in most societies today, I mean, no matter which, this whole idea of equality and gender is very new, and it's not really applicable all the way through politics, for example. So, besides that issue, we have a military industry. I mean, by profession, I'm a psychologist. And I lived in Ireland for 27 years. The first 5 years were in Brazil, so I'm just giving you a background on how I'm trying to, since I was a kid, trying to find my place in the world. So when I worked, I worked with really extreme trauma, like sexual abuse and victims of torture. So I started reading about the military industry, and I started reading about the torture industry. I mean, that didn't make sense. What do you mean torture industry? And it's like, yeah. So that was 20 years ago, and at the time there was like more than 140 companies in the world that makes instruments of torture to sell it, and using technology, like an electric belt. You can electrocute somebody with remote control. And these are being sold by, the West to, not just the West, but they're being sold to third world countries that want to appear humane to the West. And somehow that's okay within capitalist systems. So this is how fucked up it is. So how did we move from 20,000 years ago, from having an open relationship with nature, from making mythologies, not knowing stuff but trying, to the current state where we're in? So I'm going to bring you back 20,000 years ago and flesh out the complexity of how we got here. And I'll give you, the purpose of all of this is to move beyond nationalism and beyond shaming other cultures or shaming ourselves, and just embrace how fucked up it is and try to be realistic about dreaming about the future. But for now, I'm taking you 20,000 years back and just exploring, what does nature want? Does nature want us to be relaxed and chilled out? Well, yes, we want that, but our wiring, that's not the priority. For example, imagine two sisters in the jungle, in the woods, and one of them is like really hysterical, and really nervous. And the other one is like super chilled out. Oh, look at this. Oh, this is so beautiful, and this is so beautiful, So contrast these two, and a tiger is coming. Well, which one is he going to eat first? Oh, you're so beautiful, Lolo. The other one would have lagged it. So having a disposition of everything is relaxed, you get eaten first. So by design, being nervous and putting yourself first, that survives more. So if you want to be nice, you have to work double hard. You have to protect yourself, and you have to appreciate the tiger from a distance. So that's fundamental to our existence. Again, back to the fear and anger. What else? Well, guess how many chickens there are in the world? There's about 7 billion people and like 26.5 billion chickens in the world. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I was a chicken and I'm thinking, what's my fate? You know, chicken shawarma at Barbar, fuck that shit. I'm out of here. You know, I'm gone. But that's not how it pans out. You know, we're wired to stay here no matter how fucked up it is. I mean, there are, you know, every 30 seconds somebody commits suicide in this world, but they, you know, have to be really finding life very difficult. So the point is, nature replicates itself without our conscious involvement in it. You know, I mean, there are social pressures, you know, have you gotten married yet? Have you had kids yet? From the grandfathers, whatever, you know, your parents, from society. You have that, but, you know, you have also a wiring, and you also have that thing about falling in love when you're in the first 6 months. You know, I mean, everything changes, your chemistry changes, you know, and I think if we didn't have that, if we really, you know, contemplated, do I want to be in a relationship? Relationships are tough, no matter how much you want to work with the wiring of wanting love. It's complicated. So nature is replicating itself, which means we're having a lot of, you know, we're having kids. And it starts getting more complex. For example, how many butterflies are there in the world? How many different types of butterflies? And it's 17,500 different types of butterflies. Well, what does that mean? It means diversity. Nature, I mean, if you think of the Big Bang, there were only a few chemicals back then. But life just keeps on getting more complex. That means if you have 10 kids, they're not going to come out like you. You'd be lucky if one of them comes out like. Now, parents want their children to, you know, and they start to drill in their children, you know, principles, and you should behave like this. But out of 10 children, you'd be lucky if one comes out looking like the parents. And it's not like the parents are exact copy of each other either. Most relationships, you know, the parents each has a different view, so things are getting more complex. And the question is, so we're having more babies, we're having more children, we're diversifying, we're different from each other. How do we govern each other? How we govern ourselves? Well, you know, every time I go to this, you know, get a massage to relax and shit, and there's always dolphins in the background. You know, and there's this idea that dolphins are really beautiful creatures. They're more evolved than us, and they're, you know, that's some of the, you get that with the New Age stuff, you know. So about 20 years ago, or maybe 10, you know, I went on holidays with a friend. It was supposed to be a surfing holiday. It was started to rain, and I came across this swimming with dolphin aqua park kind of thing. So I said, oh fuck it, I'll check it out. I was swimming with the dolphins, and I saw they were scratched. Here I got really upset. You know, how could they treat them like this? These are beautiful creatures. You know, I got out of the water and I was walking out, and I met one of the guys who worked there, and I was really holding myself back from being angry. It's like, how could you treat them like this? And so I was like, what's going on with the scratches? And I said, yeah, it's a pyramid system. I said, what? It's a pyramid system. You know, you've got a male, an alpha male. As mammals, you've got an alpha male, and he fights the other males so can have sex with the females. Well, this is just mammalian wiring. So by design, mammals are designed that way, you know. So as we evolve, we're still in small communities now, you know, say, let's say a tribe of 10 people. We're still hunter-gatherers. Even when the leader wants to be benevolent, and, you know, Tony has a fight with Ahmed, it's like, okay, Ahmed, sit here, Tony, sit here. What's going on? You know, and you can spend hours trying to, it's like, okay, what's your view? You can spend 5 hours doing this stuff, and they meet. But if you got 500 people, well, that same benevolent leader has to make general decisions. He no longer has time to listen to Tony and Ahmed. So Tony could end up feeling, you don't represent me. I'm going to make my own political party. And Ahmed is like, really? Well, your political party does not represent me. So this is how we start diversifying. And this is how it starts getting more complex. And with time, we moved from being hunter-gatherer to being agricultural. You know, so hunter-gatherer means you follow the animal. And back then, the concept of fast food was different. You know, it's the food that was fast, and you have to run after it. You know, so when we discovered agriculture, it's like, we don't need to move anywhere anymore. And here, and this is about 12,000 years ago. So here, what happened is we started to come up with really creative ideas of how to affect nature. And with time, what started to shift is that we started to feel we're dominant over nature. So that previous disposition, your relationship with the world, with mythology, of trying to negotiate and the cosmos, life is bigger than you, we moved away from that. We started feeling, no, I am God now. And slowly, that thinking, that self-centeredness, that, it started to permeate all aspects of life, from sociology to arts. So again, what started to happen now is that there's much more people living in one space, and again, we go back to, well, how do we manage each other? And again, even when the leader is benevolent and wants to rule with love, there are complexities. And one of the biggest, most complex things is sexuality. And I'll give you an ideal situation, for you to imagine. Let's imagine two leaders, two guys, standing next to each other, and a pretty woman walks by. It's like, ooh, did you get affected? Says, yeah. What about you? Yeah, me too, man. Well, if we, the smart elder people, are being moved, what chance do the younger men coming into puberty have? So, okay, you know what? I'm going to go off for a year, try to work on this issue, and how about you do that? That's a great idea. So they meet a year later. So what happened? Well, I did meditation for a whole year. Man, I reached some really amazing states of oneness with everything. Wow, okay, and when a woman passes by, I'm still affected. Okay, what about you? What'd you do? A whole year of yoga. I was all sorts of poses, man. I can do those contortions. And what about the woman issue? Same problem. Okay, hajjaba, which means put a scarf on her. And this, again, this issue of, It's not just a simple feature of Arabic culture. That exists in all cultures. If you take a look at, picture of Victorian women, I mean, have you seen that stuff? What it does to their insides? You know, ah. Or in China, somehow they wanted women to have smaller feet. I don't know why, man. Is that what the foot fetish started then? But they wanted a woman to have smaller feet, so they came up with the genius idea of having metallic boots. And what do? You get bone deformities. So, really, it's what we men couldn't control on ourselves, decided to put it on women. But like I said, as a teenager, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. How did men start to feel superior when at one time we looked at women as being sacred? And some of it has to do with sex education. I mean, sex education today is changing, but only a short while ago. What am I? I'm 54. So 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I'm trying to figure out how did men in general come to resent women even though we're dominating them? And I'm trying to figure, well, I only just crossed my mind recently that as a 5-year-old, you're not given sex education. You're told that women bring life. And what's the role of the boy? We don't tell boys anything. Things are changing, but I'm just trying to, put it in a historical context. So boys look at girls and life comes through them, and what's my role? Well, you don't have a role. Well, shit, man. So we don't really have a role. We're really useless. So if women start figuring out that we're useless, they'll get rid of us. So maybe we should start, keeping this dominance thing, And the problem, I think, is not just not telling boys that they do have a role. It's when do we tell them? When do we tell boys we have a role? Well, it's either a little bit before puberty or just after puberty. Well, there's a problem with that because when puberty hits, for us boys, it's like one big magical power. I mean, Superman is nothing, You can touch yourself and feel that way. I mean, you've read about drugs, but this is fucking amazing, And within 2 or 3 weeks, though, we boys realize this is amazing, but we're prisoners. We can't stop doing it, So, cut to 40 years later, I'm just using myself as an example, So, you can work on this stuff, but I mean, a few months ago, I was in the car with my wife, and I noticed a pretty woman, and I just wanted to check with my wife whether me noticing women, and at this stage, I'm accepting my biology and all of this stuff, me noticing women, is it vulgar? So I checked with her, you okay with how I notice women? And she says, yeah, you're human. Except that's 40 years of work to notice that it's only 1 second between noticing a woman as a beautiful part of nature in the same way that you'd notice a beautiful flower and my inner monkey waking up. Inner monkey wants to grab. And sex is really, it's an endless, you get into it, you start reading about spirituality and tantric sex and all of that. And the funny thing about sex is that it goes way beyond biology. It is biology, but it's more as well. You look into your lover's eyes long enough and you're trying to connect, you may end up in a state where you don't know where you end and your partner begins. Now, Abu al-Abid doesn't want to lose his sense of self. Abu al-Abid is like, fuck this shit, I just want to fuck. Now I understand if Abu Labid just had, Abu Labid, by the way, is a Lebanese stereotype. I understand if Abu Labid just had a messy relationship and things didn't work out. Now, so he wants to just get into primal stuff and be an animal for a while and then try to rethink stuff. But the reality is that when we were teenagers, thinking back to when we hit puberty, the reality is that most of us guys were humble about it. Like I said, we discover sexuality. It's amazing, but within a very short while, we can't stop masturbating. So, and we're open about this shit, and we're talking to each other, and then we notice one of the classmates, one of the guys, starts, who was a regular, held themselves loosely. Now they're walking with a lot of confidence. And we're like looking at each other, why is he so confident? I mean, what is this bullshit? We are being humbled by something bigger than us. We don't understand how that works. How does this guy start acting as if he's in control? And we know none of us is in control. Well, here's my theory. My theory is that this guy is really thrown off by sex being bigger than him. So he's bullshitting himself that he's in control. And it's a form of lying to yourself. And it makes sense to me that this guy who's now lying to himself and bullshitting himself would eventually vote for a politician who's a better liar than he is. So I'm trying to make some links. And within all of this process, and back to evolution, we're boxing things. We don't understand what's going on. Things are just keep on getting more complex. But at a certain point, we also start taking shortcuts with our thinking. For example, they tell us that we made it to the moon or that the world is round. Well, we have to take each other's word for it. You can get into it a little bit, but we are taking shortcuts. And we're also specializing. And, like, as I said, nature is getting more diverse. And at the same time, we're getting more specialized. And we don't have, something goes wrong in the house, you call a plumber. You get sick, you call a doctor. You're a musician. We don't have time to deal with all the complexities of our diversity and how we started to evolve. So I'm trying to think here, especially during the elections and all of that, because I find myself, like everybody else, being human. Those who have a different political thinking, I'm calling them an idiot. How could you be voting for the same politician that brought us here? How does that happen? So I challenged myself. I asked myself, okay, how would you tell a 7-year-old boy that Santa Claus is not real? So, because in my thinking, the politicians are convincing certain groups that they are their God, and some of them really believe. They start using narrative that this usually is a man. This man is God, and they actually use those words while at the same time pretending to belong to a system that is religious and is supposed to be blasphemous. But how does that work out? So how do I communicate with this guy? Because I want to convince this guy, I want to get through to him that your leader is a liar. Your leader is bullshitting you. So how do I talk to him? How do I convince him that his leader is Santa Claus? Well, with the economic collapse in Lebanon, Santa Claus is giving less presents than before. And maybe this guy actually knows at this stage, is beginning to hit home that, well, maybe he's not Santa Claus. The problem is if he goes to his leader and says, you're not Santa Claus, he's not going to get any presents at all. So you're getting a sense of how really complex it is when we are actually raised in schools with linear logical thinking of how to solve problems when the real problems are much bigger than us. And the last point on all of this, on the issue of complexity, and there's far more. I mean, there's a lot of disciplines out there. You know, this is a never-ending. I just wanted to give you a flavor for today, so that we arrive to the same comfortable place of fuck it, it's all fucked up, because it's humanizing on some level. It it connects us, and I'll show you why I'm doing this. But the last point on this is how we're raised to present ourselves, which is, how are you? I'm good. And that feature is in all cultures. You could be fucked up and you're still saying, I'm good. I'm going to give you an idea, or that's not an idea, I'm going to give you, I'm going to share with you what's going on internally for me. So how do you think the play is going? I told you it's not a play. I thought you said in the beginning it's not a play, you fucking idiot. Why are you calling me an idiot? You know, I think it's going fine. Oh, really? You think it's going fine? Yeah, I think it's going fine. Hey, guys, there's a girl who's looking at us. Girl? We don't want a woman. No, the woman looking at us, and she's really pretty, and she's got really big eyes. Really? Where is she sitting? I think she's the second table. You know, how do we know for sure she's looking at us? Well, just get close to the stage and just see her. Oh, fuck, that's your wife, you fucking idiot. That's how really? That's it? Yeah. And that's all you did? You just looked at her and you moved away? I mean, that is stupid. You know, when you get home, you better pray that she's okay with how you dealt with that bit. You know, pray? What do you mean pray? I mean, I told you I don't believe with the guy with the fucking beard. You know, well, maybe you pray for Shiva. Shiva's a fucking bitch, man. Shiva's gonna kill you. And you really want the Indian mythology come into your fucking system? By the way, Shiva could be a guy. What? Really? So, that, what I just shared with you, I don't know, it took about 2 minutes to share that with you, but that probably takes 2 seconds. The reality is, internally, we have a very complex inner world, and we have, and in the school, I mean, I fucking hated school, man, because it was like 90% of it just bullshit. Just teach me how to fucking write, and that's it, But the reality is, what I just shared about you, what I just shared about the last 20,000 years and how we're evolving and how it's getting more complex, it's a feature of all societies. I'm not giving you anything you don't know. I'm just naming it. And that's all I'm doing. And the reality is that, I did call this show, the evolution of the Lebanese brain, but our brains haven't, the wiring doesn't change from culture to another. What changes is the habits. What changes is the flavor of the culture, So, the Lebanese culture is different. And there are things that I love about the Lebanese culture, that I adore about the Lebanese culture. And, I can forget myself for a while and start thinking, whoa, what do I love about the Lebanese culture? Well, food. Every time they colonized us, somebody colonized, whether it's the French or the Turks, we improved their food. It's like croissant. Well, do the French have croissant with za'atar? No. You go to Paris, it's like, that shit is not better than our shit. Or Turkey. Have you been to Istanbul? Have you tasted their coffee? We put hell in it. We put cardamom in it. We improved it. All they do is cook meat. We put parsley in it. Fuck you. So, I kind of, when I was doing this, I did the show in Arabic, and I was thinking, okay, so I'm expanding the definition of Lebanese to include those who were not born here or maybe only here for a short while. So there are things about the Lebanese culture which is very hard to translate. For example, my favorite is the swearing. And I'm going to give you a flavor, and I'm also going to give you a flavor of how difficult it is to translate, but I'm also going to give you a gift. If you're not Lebanese and you're not familiar with a couple of things, I'm going to equip you with a couple of things that will help you not only integrate, but impress, even if you've been only here, even if you've been here only for a short while. But before I do that, I just want to connect with our sense of humor. As a teenager, one of the most beautiful things I heard is بجعل الله ما خلقك, which means I'll make God not have created you. Ooh, this is beautiful. But there are simpler things, like, for example, actually, no, there is a joke which I love till this day, and it's not translatable, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a joke. I'll say it in Arabic first. أبو العبد بفوت على السينما وكومبلي بيقوم أيرو بيقعد محله. Which is, you go to the cinema, it's full, and Abu al-Abad gets his dick up and sits in his place. Now, that to me is quantum physics. It doesn't, and then, now here's the bit where I can simplify things. And it is, ayri bi ayri. It makes no sense. That's perfect quantum physics, which means my dick in my dick. But for the purposes of those who are not born here, I'm gonna just, give you a couple of things only. One is, no matter what it is, you can say ayri bi ayri. Ayri bi ayri. And people will be impressed with that because there's a depth to it. There is it doesn't make sense, in the same way that quantum physics doesn't make sense. You get into quantum physics, and Richard Feynman, 1967, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, if you don't get quantum physics, you're on the right track. So that's ayri bi ayri. Can you put, the second thing is this. Okay? Now, and a lot of cultures, okay, fix Sheila, you can take it off. So, and a lot of culture, this is basically, it's just supposed to be penis, in the same way as like this. But when I moved to Ireland and, got exposed to the English culture or the American culture, it's usually fuck off or fuck you. This is far more flexible. This is like, so anything, and I mean, I kind of don't suggest that you do it with authority or with anybody who's taking themselves too seriously, but if you go to the guy who's changing money for you, he gives you the money, before you give him the dollars, you go like this to the dollars, he'll love it, So this is my gift to you, this and ayri. I think as a starting point, ayri bi ayri and this is really will get you to a lot of places. You'll get respect, and you won't know how, and the other person won't know how you've got this going, And I guess I want to share, the goodness of what we managed to create. Just like when I went to Ireland, one of the most beautiful things I heard is that Irish diplomacy is about telling you to go to hell in such a way that you would look forward to the trip. That is beautiful, and every culture has something beautiful. Now, back to internalizing shame, and Lebanese people will feel this, and if you're not Lebanese, but you come from a culture that has been colonized, like the Irish have been colonized by the British for 800 years, or if you're American, you're Native American Indian, you'll relate to what I'm about to say. Because when I was a teenager, I would go to England and I would go to the museums, and these like huge museums, whether it's Louvre or museums in London or in America, and you're walking by and it's like, wow, isn't that one from our region? So how are museums a sign of pride for the colonizing culture. To me, it's like an open admission of how much shit you've stolen. And I guess one of the most bizarre thefts, I figured that out as a kid, is Jesus. How did he become blonde and blue eyes? You know, he comes from this region, and now he's blonde and blue eyes, but it doesn't stop there. They gave the whole land in his birthplace to a group that have nothing to do with the region. And at the same time, the West will say they're Christian, but I say, when I say, you know, West, I'm gonna get to China and Iran and Russia and all over. It's all fucked up. But I'm just gonna give you, and each has its own gripe with this colonizing. Like the Tibetans, when I went to Tibet, I had hope for Palestinians because 70% don't have passports. But for now, I'm still getting my head around how did Jesus, who was born in this region, become blonde and blue eyes, and the whole land of where he was born was given away, and now the West are saying they're Christians, they can't even go there. The birthplace, Bethlehem, is in West Bank. And the Palestinian journalist, Shireen Akli, who was assassinated only the last 10 days, well, she's Christian. And yet, she's being protected. It was an assassination, but like they call it, died. So that's a person of perfect situation of ayri bayri. Like, there is no other way that my mind can fathom it. And this I need more than two hands, to conceptualize this. So all of these divisions, that have been created throughout history, there's nothing new about the situation in Lebanon. The Irish were colonized for 800 years, and now they speak English. But somehow they retained a specific spirit that is very different from the British. Still, it's a common feature for colonized societies or societies that are not doing well to internalize shame. A few months ago, while I was writing this show, I met a friend who said they lost all their money in the banking system. The collapse and the theft, that's all it is a theft. I'm not saying the IMF is not mafia, it's all fucked up. But this friend said one more thing, which is, at least in the developed countries, politicians leave some money for their people. I disagree. Corrupt politicians steal as much as they can. They only stop because the system can expose them. It's a system issue. It's not that the fiber of a people is different. Yet, again and again, this whole concept of different countries, nationalism, that is made up. Tell that to a Native American Indian. Somebody comes and draws lines, 500 years ago, there was no such thing called Germany. Lebanon didn't exist as a country 150 years ago. These things got carved out by the same dynamics that I kind of outlined of how we got here. The reality is that throughout humanity, you have a minority groups of people who are trying to steal somebody else's shit, but you also have, throughout the history of humanity, people recognizing each other's humanity. When I went to Ireland in '85, and I've been going to England for a while because my dad was living there, I didn't feel inferior because they know what it's like. They know what it's like to be colonized. And I heard, in the last year, I heard in Scotland, when Rangers plays against Celtics, and Ireland and Britain, especially Northern Ireland and some parts of Scotland, well, you've got Catholics and you've got the Protestants, and the Protestants are more associated with colonialist Britain, while the Catholics feel the underdog. Check this out. Can you فيك صورة السoccer, please? Okay, so basically this is Celtics and Rangers playing each other. These are Palestinian flags. And the ones that are associated with the Protestant side sometimes put Israeli flags. Okay, finish Sheila, please, thanks. So there are divisions constantly being created by those in positions of power, trying to divide people from one another, reinforce that you are different from somebody else, and people believing that for all sorts of reasons. And you have people who see beyond that and see the humanity of each other, just like what you just saw. So I was making a documentary on Palestine about 8 years ago. I did, it took me 5 years to do it. I was doing it independently. And I interviewed an Irish musician from a band called Keela. His name is Ronan Osnadi, but it's a difficult name to remember for us, maybe. So just check out Keela and the singer and the bowrum player. So I was like, well, what can we Arabs and Palestinians learn from Ireland? Because Ireland had 800 years, and they still retained a specific spirit of their culture that I love. And at this stage, I spent more time living in Ireland, 27 years, more than I've spent living in Lebanon. The first 4 or 5 years were in Brazil, and then I was in Lebanon for a while. And so that was my question to him. What can we learn? And he's like, by all means, make songs of protest, but make sure that you also make songs that have nothing to do with your enemy, because you don't want to define yourself by your enemy. So back to today, the situation is very fucked up, and people are emigrating, and I'm not judging that, just because I'm here, because I've lived, outside Lebanon too. But the reality is that there are people here whose just sole existence is a form of resistance. I mean, one of the most beautiful people I know is Adib from the Little Bookshop. And it's this very small bookshop, but I love books. And Adib opens when he feels like it, and it's usually like 6 afterwards, 6 to 11. It's like, Adib, why don't you make it, specific time? It's like, no, I don't want to be, So just to meet him and just to see the bookshop, it's near Hamra. It's a couple of streets before, بتعرفي بأي شارع? Off Janda. It's called the Little Bookshop. And there's also Alia's bookshop, which is in Jemaisi. And that's a bookshop that is also, they have music there, and you can order from 2 different restaurants. To me, that is a form of resistance. After all the things that are happening here, and the collapse and further collapse, and I'm saying this because I get physically tired from people who are shaming all of the Lebanese people. You don't want to live here, you find it difficult. Yes, I understand. I understand how you get into self-shaming. I'm discussing it. But ultimately, there is a problem when you start shaming yourself. One of the music that I love, the history, is the blues. So this is literally taking people from a continent, Africa, West Africa, transporting them to a completely new culture, and being enslaved with chains, yet they would sing. Well, why did they sing? When you're chained, there is no prospect of becoming famous. There's no prospect of financial gains, but they were singing. Well, I think they were singing because the soul recognizes that if you don't keep the soul alive somehow, that's the end. Something in us will sing. And I've had my own struggles with depression. That's how it got me into psychology. I was struggling with depression for 40 years. Eventually, I came out of it. And I'm going to tie, and the reason I'm telling you this, because I'm going to tie it with some stuff at the end. But there is a point where if you lose all hope, you start sinking. So what happened with blues? Well, eventually, when black people, African Americans, no longer became slaves, blues itself moved into the city, became electric blues, and it started to become joyful. That is alchemy. The alchemy is a practice, in the last 500 years alchemy was supposed to be really chemists trying to change base metals into gold. But there's a spiritual undercurrent beneath it that is a spiritual one. Ultimately, you're actually working on yourself. It's a metaphor. And what's happening with blues? Blues basically was songs of desperation just to keep the light still lit. And then it became blues, and then, and the blues itself moved to being electric, and then with time it evolved, became more complex, it became jazz, and you still had blues, so it started to diversify. Like everything in nature diversifies, and diversified into gospel. Now, what is gospel? Gospel is about singing for the afterlife. You're trying to keep the hope alive. You're singing that eventually you'll go to heaven. Well, funk came. James Brown was like, fuck that shit. We want it now. We don't want to sing about the afterlife. And that's how you got funk music. That's how you got James Brown, now, and a whole lot of other stuff. It's a whole movement. And it may not look political today, but funk was a threat for the American establishment when it started to take off. So the whole point of getting you here is getting us to a place where, well, it's all fucked up. Because ultimately, this friend was telling you about, who was saying that they lost all their money and believes that in civilized countries, the politician doesn't do that. Well, wait a minute. We all know the money is leaving the country. Where is it going? Switzerland? America? France? Don't the banking system know? I mean, give me a fucking break. What is the IMF anyway? I'm saying this because ultimately we're all connected. And while there isn't a slavery system in the States today, most capitalist systems is actually a system of enslavement. So, as far as I'm concerned, we're all connected. We're all struggling in a different way. Civilizations go up and down. And this is the, I want to now, move to the second part of the show, which is the importance of dreaming of a better future. And I gave you the blues as an example. So, personally, I believe in dreaming. I'm convinced of it from a personal place, having struggled with depression, and also having noticed cultures like Ireland who managed to retain, and also the blues. And I can see it. If we lose all hope, something inside starts to die. And you living a shadow of what your life can be. But so I want to start exploring dreaming with you. Now, before I want to do that, I want to ground it in reality. I am not saying dreaming in a completely unrealistic way that everything is going to be fine. The reality is that all fields have bullshit in them. I mean, the field of psychology has a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of books written out there with really big fucking complicated words, and then somebody else, another theorist writes this, So bullshit is everywhere. And, maybe about a year ago, I was watching this video, some spiritual guru, and he was like, I don't have any thoughts. Apparently he's saying he meditated so much he doesn't have any thoughts. Fuck you, that's a thought. What do you mean you don't have any thoughts? Come here, let me put some electrodes on your head. Of course. So bullshit is everywhere. So, what in relation to, I was trying to make sure that when I was writing this, that somehow I can share with you what I did as a kid that hurt me, which is internalizing the shame and saying Arabs are lies. Now I've worked on it long enough not to do that anymore. And I worked on dreaming as well. So to make sure I don't preach on you and bullshit myself in the process by really smart, things and using intellect to bullshit you, I did they call it thought experiment in physics, especially in quantum physics, when you can't prove something because you don't have the tools to measure stuff yet. What you do a thought experiment. You come up with an idea, and physicists will thrash it out. And the purpose of it is just to explore something and see things in a new way that you might not have thought of it before. You might not solve you might not crack something, but in the process you expand from where you were. So I came up with this idea. What would I do? What would I promise you if I was to run for politics? So the next elections was it 4 years or 6 years? 6? Okay. Oh, I like it, already arguing. Okay, so, but, for the sake of this thought experiment, when I did this show in Arabic, I was thinking, of what would I promise you if I was to run for office as a Lebanese politician. But since then, now that I'm expanding this to all nationalities, I was like, okay, if I became ruler of Lebanon in 10 years' time and things are going really well, maybe I'll rule the whole world. And this apparently, there's a lot of data that's being released about UFOs and aliens, and by the American administration in the last while. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll rule the whole world and maybe see what happens if aliens did come here. But for now, let's stick with Lebanon. Maybe I'll expand it. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. So here's 5 things that I would promise you that I would do if I went into politics. First one is, when we went into the demonstrations a couple of years ago, if somebody's just visiting Lebanon, so basically a couple of years ago, we would go down the street, and I was one of them, and it would be like, we would shout, "Kullun yani kullun," which means all of them means all of them. It's an expression that we're fed up of the whole system being corrupt, and we want to move beyond tribalism, and we want to move beyond religious identity. Well, when I was looking at that, I was like, you know what? Kullun yani kullun, all of them means all of them. We're being transparent with them. We're actually telling them exactly how it is. And that's not how politics works. They don't work through honesty and openness. They're trying to figure shit out. And it's like, well, why don't we play their game? So I came up with this plan that it gets executed in 3 stages. And the first stage, well, instead of saying kullun yani kullun means all of them, even half, I think is too much. So we go down and say 1/3 means 1/3. So how does that work out? Well, they're looking at each other and it's like, they don't want all of us to go. So the majority will gang against the weaker and get rid of the third. That was stage 1. So stage 2 was like 1/4. We want 1/4 of you down. And it was like, oh, well, okay. So they asked for 1/3 and now 1/4, and that's less. So I guess they're being placated somehow. And they would get rid of the 4th. And the third part of the plan, we would ask for 7/4 to go down. First of all, it confuses the fuck out of them. But really what it is, 7/4 is actually 4/4, which is all of them plus 3/4. That's how I would get into politics. So that's my first stage. The second thing I would do is that I would give the workers rights. Because ultimately we have a society where politicians, back to the dolphin bullshit stuff, ultimately it's a system of oppression. And my guess is at a certain point we need to face what we're living with. And again, if I was a world leader, I would open America to Mexicans. China is a bit more difficult. I mean, China is like, what the fuck, 1 million people, and they don't give a shit. China is like, well, fuck you. We're not talking about human rights, and you can't reach them either. So I would do that. Third thing, gay and lesbian rights. Somehow humanity always needed somebody to be an underdog. Now, there is a study that says that this part of our brain, the amygdala, apparently if you show a picture to another human being of a person who belongs to a different group, different color, the bit that is responsible for anger lights up 1/10 of a second. But then it gets shut down by a different part of our brain that has been socialized. It's like, no, it's fine, it's okay. So we have anger systems within us. We are built into tribalist organization as part of our wiring. But we also, over years and years, we also tried to humanize ourselves a bit more and see like everybody gets hurt. Everybody's looking for love. Everybody's looking for security. So that's what I would do. The fourth thing is back to women. It's like, why do I go back to women? Because as half of humanity, as a guy, I am not enjoying, nor do I feel associated with Mr. Macho Guy. So I have a friend who teaches Muay Thai. Rocky. Just 1 minute. So you see those leaflets on the tables? So Rocky is offering the first 3 ladies who would contact him, he would give them a free lesson. Now, I want him to come up because I want to see what a beautiful smile he has. Because if you had just a leaflet, you're not going to want to hang out with him. So, as a politician, okay, as a politician or as an aspiring politician, my friend Rocky, I've trained with him for 1.5 years, is offering this. So, as a jest, after the show, whoever contacts first, there's the first 3 ladies, not men, will get a free lesson. The 5th thing is connecting with my heritage. And if I became a world leader, then I would encourage whatever societies have stopped being in touch with their heritage. I would encourage to find some way to connect, to encourage people to connect with their heritage. I'll give you an example. I've already told you that stuff about how I was growing up as a teenager and not, having a resonance with the macho man, and at the same time I love women, and I don't mean it in a Casanova way, I love my wife and she's here. And so in the last 7 years since I moved back to Lebanon, I wanted to connect with my heritage. And it's like maybe move away from feeling a lesbian, because maybe So I came to her and I said, I'm going to have to say it in Arabic first, So I wanted to romance her. And I said, in an Tripoli accent, تتاكلي بخراكي, and that didn't go down very well. Literally the translation is you're all edible, all of you, including your shit. So that didn't go down well, but I found it funny. It didn't work out, but so that's still a work in progress. So these are the 5 things that I would promise you as an aspiring politician. Now, as part of the experiment, a thought experiment, I'm now gonna, so my guess is that at least some of you would vote for me. And those who instinctively might want to vote for me, who might want to check me out, check out my background. Well, here's 5 things that you wouldn't find out about me, no matter how many journalists you send or how much research you do. And there's a purpose of why I'm sharing this with you, but I'm going to share it with you, and then I'll explain it later. And the 5 things is the following. First of all, I know anything about politics. I only learned the name of our prime minister about 10 days ago. I'm trying to think if I remember. It's not Miati, is it? Oh, it is Miati. Okay, so even that, and I've been here for 7 years. But I'm convincing. Well, some of you would be convinced, but it's very easy to pretend I know. So that may be a good thing, that might be a bad thing. I don't know. I'm just sharing with you what you wouldn't find out, okay? The second thing is that my heart resonates with the underdog. When my daughter was 7 years old and I was living in Ireland, she would be watching a kiddies program, and whenever there's an underdog, my eyes would tear, and she'd look at me and says, "Dad, you're gay." And I would explain stuff. And well, wait a minute, it has nothing to do with gay. And I would explain it. She says, "Dad, stop explaining, you're gay." But the point is that somebody comes over and convinces it might be a good idea to arm the workers and potters and get them to a political group and give them guns. Maybe I might think it's a good idea just to set the balance straight, So that's the second thing. The third thing is, well, like I said, I struggle with depression. So there is a TEDx talk out there, where I'm talking about, how I work through depression. Now, in the video, it looks like, I'm wearing a suit, so I'm talking really balanced. So I look like, well, this guy, he's really worked on his stuff and he's being open about it. But here's something that only a couple of friends know. When the big explosion happened, and the port, so the explosion was a year and a half ago, was it? Almost 2 years, was it? Almost. What is it? Okay, well, that already gives you a sense of how spacey I am, and what my relationship time to mine. But I happened to be in Dubai at the time, and my wife rings in and says, "I've been trying to call you." And says, "Yeah, okay." I was like, "This was a huge explosion." I was like, "Okay." He says, "No, you don't understand." I was like, "Well, I grew up in the Civil War, so." It's okay, never mind. Just when you get to your room, look at the footage. I look at the footage and was like, wow, I missed all of that. So I ring my friend, and it's like, how was the explosion? He was like, yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, I know, but the sound, because I'm also a musician, so I was, it's like AC/DC kind of sound. He was like, look, it was horrible. Like, okay. So I ring my brother, we grew up in the Civil War, It's like, and my brother was in Spain. It's like, don't you miss the sound of bombs from the Civil War? He was like, no. So I was like, ooh. So it took me a few days to realize how fucked up my reaction is and how much shit I still have to work with. And I'm trying to figure out, how did I get to love the sound of bombs? Well, when I was 13, I was living in Tripoli. Usually, this fighting starts on a Friday night. So if I have an exam on Monday, I'd start praying the fighting continues so I don't have to do the exam. And then I'd start thinking, well, people are dying. I don't want that. So somehow I taught myself to wish that fighting would continue and nobody would die. So somehow that's built in. I'm just sharing with you how fucked up I am. Although I may not look it, But I've shared enough tonight anyway. But so the fourth thing is, and he wouldn't know this stuff, because I think I can be convincing. So the fourth one is this. The fourth one is, if a journalist checks my background, it's like, oh, he studied in Ireland in a Trinity College. That's a very reputable college. And he has 3 masters. Wow. He must really respect education. I hate education. I'll tell you, when I was a teenager in school in Tripoli, one time I raised my hand. I said to the teacher, like, all those politicians, they've all finished school? And he was like, yeah, of course. It's like, so what's the point? And I retained that. I retained that question of, what does education give you? Does it make you more humane? So if I went into politics for real, here's my dream. Here's what I wouldn't tell you. What I would do if I, and I had enough influence and power, I would set up one day, where this would be executed in the same day, okay? So all the schools in Lebanon, and by the way, if I became a world leader and somehow I'm working with the aliens, I would do this globally. And the same day, all teachers would walk into class, irrespective of ages, and apologize. And if it's a kid, irrespective, say, this rating system is a lie. Each one of you is an angel. Each one of you deserves 10 teachers. The reason you're not getting 10 teachers to 1 is simple economics, but that's not your fault. You actually deserve that. And you feeling shame about your grades is actually a sign that the system doesn't have a chance to give you what you need. We're lumping all of you. Our salaries are shit. You should see salaries of teachers throughout the world. The fact that you can graduate from in America and in a college and be in debt for the next 20 years, that's fucked up. So that's the first part of the plan. The second part of the plan is that in the afternoon, all the parents will be contacted and be told that there's an emergency meeting, they need to come. So the parents of the children across all ages would come in. A teacher would go in and the door would be locked behind them. The teacher would say, okay, look, I have nothing to do with this, but your children have been kidnapped. And I have been sent here to just do a survey of what are you willing to do to get your children out of it. So some parents will say, well, I'm willing to use guns. So, okay, I'm just going to write this down. And some parents would say, well, I'm willing to pay a lot of money. And I'm, no judgment, I'm just taking this. And somebody, some parents might not have neither money or, so, okay, well, just document it. On the hour, An hour later, the door opens and the teacher escapes. And the parents are being told that they get reunited with their children. They were never kidnapped. It was just a setup. In the meantime, I'm in Ireland. Or if I'm president of the world, I've elected with the aliens. And I would send the parents an email saying, look, first of all, I apologize. I don't have a better idea than this. I just want to say one thing to you, which is that your children, and the way it was for me, is that I was being threatened by the system of grades on a regular basis for years. And there are some students, when they're applying for the college, some students commit suicide. There is something inherently very fucked up about education, especially when you look into this world and you realize, if you ask people, if you won $1 million, a million euros or whatever, would you stay in your job? Most people say no. Well, there's something fucked up about the way we evolve with technology, and yet somehow we don't like what we do. And as far as I'm concerned, most of my education was bullshit, all the way up, including psychology. I mean, one of the things that I've struggled with, trying to get myself out of depression, is that psychology books are usually written by somebody who hasn't had much struggle. They're using a language of somebody observing, and it's so heavily theorized, so many big fucking words, and I'm not relating to this shit. So there's a lot of digging and a lot of first-hand experience to get out of that. So that's the fourth one, which wouldn't be very apparent. The fifth one is, well, it's lighter, but again, I'm giving you a snapshot of what goes on internally. And maybe this is unique to me, maybe it's not as relevant, but I'll just share it with you. There's three things which I kind of, out of the back of my head. The first thing is when I shared with you about, well, where do we come from, and who created God and all of that, and what happened before the Big Bang. Well, what came before time? I struggle with that. Not hugely, but it's there. And in the same way, when I was growing up, I was told that the world is round, it's not flat. And I believed them, and I'm not questioning that, because with time, I got to see pictures of the world being round and all of that. But the reality is that when they told me the world is round, I stopped trusting my senses. It fucking looks flat, motherfuckers. So that was my first reaction. But with time, it's like, well, I guess I can trust my senses. So that's the same with, the nature of reality and all those quantum physics books that I'm reading. The second thing is, that bit where I shared with you all the stuff that is going internally and all those voices? Oh, I have a question for myself. Do they all live inside me? Or maybe some of them are outside me? In the same way that, if you buy 3 radios or maybe 5 radios, they look the same, but if you put them onto different channels, you've got different channels going all the time, and the waves don't live inside them. The radios look the same, but radio waves live outside those radios. So I have a question about what's going on internally, because there's synchronicities that happen with life. I'm thinking of somebody and they ring me. What the fuck is that about? Most people have had some sort of supernatural experience that they can't explain, but they just box it. It's like, yeah, okay, well, we just lived in this, this system, and we're not, there's nothing, if you can't prove it, it doesn't exist, kind of reductionist thinking. So that's the second one. The third one is, I've been told the universe is expanding. Oh, where is it going? So I don't know. So if some aliens did come and visit us, and they came to me specifically, and it was like, Sami, those things that you struggle with, we have the answers for them. And they hand me a button, one of those red buttons, I don't know what it does, but they gave it to me, and they're explaining those 3 things and this, and then they're explaining and explaining and explaining, and I'm listening, and they're explaining, and I'm not getting any of this. Most likely I'll press the button. So these are the 5 things that you would know if you were thinking of voting for me. So why am I telling you all of this? I think it's a perfect demonstration that it's very difficult, even in the best intentions, to know what's going on for the person. So, yeah, I believe in dreaming, but it's a complex process. Again, why am I saying this to you? Because I think what's happened with the elections is that when we went down to the street 2 years ago, we were so sick of the system. And it was a huge movement. And for me, some was like, nothing is going to come out of it. I disagree. There was a shift in consciousness. I think it was a true breakthrough in terms of consciousness. But when it comes to practicalities, we're still getting pissed off, and I'm one of them. I'm one of the people who get pissed off. How come civil society is not organizing itself better? How come there are a lot of groups that are opposing the current system, yet they can't meet halfway? Well, there's the complexity of what it is to be human. So I don't think, and I think, again, the reason I've used all of this is back to the same thing, so that we don't shame ourselves and we don't say, okay, we dreamt, but nothing happened. The reality is like, whatever, the reality is that civilizations come up and go down all the time. Whether we're dreaming or not, a better Lebanon is going to come. Not necessarily for the right reasons. It may be because, the countries nearby, fucked up. How sustainable is Israel? That kind of level of what they're doing to the Palestinians year after year, and there's nothing like what's happening now in Ukraine to expose how biased empathy in human beings are. Because Ukraine, and by the way, when I talk about Ukraine, it doesn't mean I'm not empathizing with the Ukrainian people. I do. But the reality is that also there's collective punishments happening with Russia, with the civil, on a civil society level. If you support Palestine and you're playing soccer and you take, you're in FIFA, you take your shirt off, you get fined for that. But if it's Ukraine, no. So what I'm sharing with you is that it's all slow change, and the purpose of today was just to show how complex change is, and at the same time not give up, So I promised you I'd summarize the whole show in the last 10 minutes, and especially for the non-Lebanese, I'm gonna do it in the Lebanese stereotype character. Now, maybe a lot of the stuff I'm saying, maybe there might be some Arabic words coming up here and there that, I don't have time to explain because I'm limited to 10 minutes. But just like I show you this, and just like I showed you Airi bi Airi, well, if you can take some of the postures, you'll go a long way. Trust me on that. So here's 10 minutes of the whole show. So I'm a little boy. I look to Allah, God, tomato, it's all the same. So Joe, where is your daddy? No, there's no daddy. I am the one. Show you the one. I told you I'm the one. Get away from here. So religion didn't help. And then I go to quantum physics, and quantum physics, what happened to before the before? They don't tell you anything. So I give up on that. So I go back to the dinosaur. So yeah, dinosaur like anger or fear all day long. Like, خلاص, you take a smoke a joint, and get rid of the whole thing, and they get instinct, and then they make the little fluffy, nature puts love, but love alone doesn't work. So what happens then? Well, you put love and fear and anger, and when we had reptiles, you saw what happened to the reptile, the iguana, the first Lebanese, by the way, the first Lebanese iguana, the snake was coming. You know what he did? He got eaten. He got eaten. And the rest of the iguana is like, let's leg it. So, okay, and then the iguana was a reptile, so I want to live all my life like this, scared? No, fuck it, I will evolve. And then we had, we had the mammals happening, and then you saw the stupid gazelle swimming. يا أخي الشرموطة ليش why are you swimming? Man, you see the crocodile. So then this is how human beings evolved. Well, they evolved from monkeys, but some of the monkeys, some of the monkeys decided not to evolve. So let's see what happened to these assholes first. If it works out for them. So this is why we still have some monkeys, because they were smarter than us. They decided not to evolve. So in the meantime, we are getting more complicated, and my wife and I are sort of figuring it out. I want to choke her and and then we created these big mythologies and stories about Allah and this and that, and somehow very quickly women were out of the half of civilization. Yeah. How? Well, there's also the military industry. How is it that there is 12 billion bullets being produced every year? How? It's like 2 bullets for every human being, including babies and children. Well, some people like guns. It gives them a hard on. I really think some people, it's like, what? When I shoot, it goes further than what I can ejaculate. I think I like guns. I'll get myself guns. And then some people will fight for your right to have guns, no matter how much it fucking kills people. And the military industry is like, you know what? All the shit you talk about, gender inequality and stuff, we don't care. We'll employ everybody as long as it's a product being sold. Like Coca-Cola, we don't give a shit. There's no morality in it. We just want to sell it. So beyond wars, as not all wars are political, there's actually a military industry that just wants to sell fucking guns. In the meantime, well, we're evolving slowly from 20,000 years ago. The nervous person survives first. If you want to be a nice guy, you have to work harder on it. In the meantime, those fucking chickens are having more chickens, but, they don't have a say in it. And at the same time, we have all these butterflies going round and round and round, and we're having more people, in the same time. It turns out dolphins are assholes, and we're part of this whole evolution. And when we're trying to be benevolent, it works for a small amount of people, but then when it goes to 500 people, we don't have the time to listen to all of you. And in the meantime, what happened 12,000 years ago? We became agricultural with life. What goes into our head, the power. Now we are Allah, we're God, tomato. And in the meantime, there is sexuality. We're trying to organize ourselves. We blame women for the things we don't have. What's the problem? Problem all along is that we all masturbate, including, yes, everybody masturbates, but we don't share the stuff. If I had a child, I didn't have the education back then, but if I had a teenage boy, I would say to him, listen, Habibi, I would say to every father who's a teenage boy, don't blame him for something you're still doing today. And by the way, don't start telling him about losing proteins, because he'll be thinking about how do I, and tell him it gets more complicated. And then I showed you how we shortcuts with the thinking, the Santa Claus, no Santa Claus. And by the way, Santa Claus and Coca-Cola are associated. And it turns out there's cocaine in Santa Claus, and they make it in Coca-Cola. And in the meantime, I expose myself and telling you everything that's going on inside me. In the meantime, it was like acting really cool, and you're not like me, and of course, yeah. And then of course I get you the point where I was really generous, especially with the non-Lebanese, and I shared Airi be Airi, and share like this, and that, and put it in a cultural context. We're all the same, except a little bit of differences. And then somehow I sold you this idea that, yes, we should dream, but then I use myself, and I conned you somehow into, voting for me, and then start telling you that, if I was really to sit down and explain to you and share with you what I wouldn't be telling you, and you were like really patiently sitting through this shit while I was trying to make myself look like a good guy, and ultimately it's all fucked up. And people we thought were heroes, like Mother Teresa, well, the shit coming out about her today was like she was really torturing the orphanage, and what we thought were heroes are not heroes, but the real heroes is us, really. And the most we can do is recognize that, well, we're all one, really, because it's always been fucked up and evolution is really slow. So for the purpose of tonight, check out the Little Bookshop, check out Alia's Bookshop, and it turns out, I'm willing to employ my friend, because I'm really back to the same system, and how am I going to set up this change the education system? Well, I'm willing to steal for it and employ my friend, and at the end of the day, what do I want? At the end of the day, it's like, I really wish that we stop hating each other, and ourselves. And I wish you that tonight, whatever way you go to bed, that you just smile, and whether you like the show or not, like, fuck this guy, I'm just gonna sleep and enjoy myself. Thank you.